Can you? Okay, give me 2 seconds here and share my screen. Okay. All righty, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Glad to see you all joining us as usual. So what we have been trying to do is, if we have any new people who have joined us this morning, if you would take 2 minutes to introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it. Hello, I know there's a couple people on new.
I'll go
new.
first.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Deborah. I'm Deborah Hankin-Kurtz. I'm dialing in from Arizona State Library, Arizona State University Library, not the State Library. And I apologize, in future meetings, I'll have camera. I'm gonna be driving to work here in a minute. And just by way of why I'm here, why I'm interested, is being able to serve all our students. And I think this is the last year has really highlighted and brought into greater focus, you know, how the implications of the digital divide and just how important it is for us to work together, and what happens when people work together to bring a solution for global health and other concerns. Thank you.
Good.
What is how do you spell your last name, Deborah?
2 words, Hanken, Kurtz, Kurtz.
Hanken, did you say? And then another word, Kurtz, is that it?
K as in kite, URTZ. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just so you know, Henry is one of our awesome people who takes great notes of our minutes. And so he wants to make sure we've got everybody. And while I'm at it, just again to thank Orison and Henry for doing such a great job of recording, of producing our minutes of our meetings. And usually by the end of the day, early the next day at the latest. So you guys, thank you very much for all the great work you do. So moving on just quickly, again, I want to remind you that we do have a list of people who are participating in the task force. If you want to be included on that list, please fill out our Google form, and so we can capture your contact information. I'd really appreciate it. So in a little while, we're going to have a presentation, or I should say more of a panel discussion and presentation on municipal networks, which is a hot topic that everybody's been talking about, a lot of movement in that space these days. So we're going to have a great program about that in just a little while. I was just telling people, I hope that my connection will be good. I am on vacation in Missouri. And rumor has it that in some rural areas, there is not good broadband. So I am on HughesNet. So far, it seems to be working okay. But I just want to let you know that. And then also, I broke my computer screen the other day. And so been having some problems with that, but so far seems to be good this morning. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. I will tell you, this vacation, it's been great. We've been having a good time, but we have had some nightmare issues along the way. But I won't take the time to share my misery with you. Anyway, let's see. So again, you can download last week's report. You can view last week's, the meeting from last week. The recording is available. That was a presentation by Steve Hill, coincidentally, who is president of the Satellite Broadcasting Association. And so you can download his presentation if you so choose. And then the last thing before we jump into our presentations is to remind you that we do have a newsletter that I try to publish, although I will tell you it is a little bit out of date because I'm on vacation. But I try to capture any important events that are happening, whether they're Arizona, local kinds of presentations, events that are coming up, funding sources, and so forth. So I'm sure it's not comprehensive, but I try to capture as much of that and keep it up to date. So I encourage you, you've got a link in the meeting announcement and also on the meeting page for you to check that out. And again, I encourage you, you will hear announcements about different events and things coming up, and the links to those as well as the information about those events is on that page. So again, I encourage you to check that out. So with that, I'm going to jump into our presentations, into our updates. And Jeff, you want to kick it off, please? Oh, sorry, Jeff, before you do that, Mala, were you able to join us?
Steve, I think we have another new person on the call as well.
Okay. We have somebody new who has joined us today.
Who posted in the chat, Kate Botcher.
Hello.
Good morning,
Hi,
Kate.
sorry
You
not to
wanna,
derail your
you wanna,
meeting.
you wanna say
Hi.
hi?
Go
It's
ahead.
great to be here.
I see you've put your coordinates, or at least your description in the chat, but go ahead and say it if you would, Kate. And
Sure. I work for a nonprofit organization called Rural Arizona Action. We advocate for working class rural communities. We're very new to broadband, but we really want to help in any way that we can. So thank you guys for hosting these meetings. It's really cool.
Kate, I think we've had somebody from your organization before, or at least you've been on our list for a while. Anyway, glad to have you. Doesn't matter. Anybody else that I missed that's new to us today? If not, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Real quick one for today. Thank you everyone who attended our NTIA webinars over the last several months. We had our last technical assistance session last Wednesday. Two of them went well, and great model for future. We're trying to figure out the best way to continue the momentum with these. Again, thank you for attending. We made a great impression with our folks in DC and really cemented some partnerships I think that you're going to hear more about as we move forward. We do have a follow-up. We have a tribal technical assistance session on Wednesday. For any of you, this is a tribes only session, but if you have any connections or groups that you work with Arizona's tribal nations, talk to me. We'll make sure that we get the information out to you. You can blast out to your contacts. We want to make sure with the NTIA $1 billion tribal grant coming up here pretty quick, that everybody who needs technical assistance gets it in that. Because again, that's great money that we can bring to Arizona from DC that will help our state. Continuing down the path with KPMG, thank you everyone who's attended the meetings. I believe they've had 15 meetings of 20 different people. Mala, I'm glad you're back. I'd really like you to meet with them if you have the time. I know that we met with Mylan and the folks from ADE. I think you have a really unique perspective on E-rate, and I'd love to have them hear that. Cindy Patak, who's on the call, I think she should maybe talk a little bit about this, but the Economic Development Administration, EDA, came out with a grant last week, and it is a whopper. It is a good one. We're super excited to partner with Cindy here in Arizona. Cindy is our EDA representative, if you have not had a chance to meet her. And we're talking about potentially even having a webinar next week about this, just to give everybody an overview of the grant and hopefully get our communities involved. So that's all I've got for today, Steve. But we're super excited about this EDA grant. And for those of you who are not aware, take a look on the web. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Jeff, I just posted a little blurb about the EDA grant with a couple of links, the landing page, the press release, and an article about it.
Mark, thank you again for sending out that email. That was a great summary, by the way. I'll tell you what, whoever's the next governor, I'm going to put you up for press secretary or something.
Good, how you doing?
That was pretty.
How was your weekend?
Pretty bullet pointed. I loved it, and I was.
Yeah, it's pretty bad over there.
Okay, we got somebody who's not muted.
I didn't realize where that levee was. He is gone. Hello? Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So that's
Go
what
ahead,
I've got
Jeff.
today, Steve. Thank you. It's okay.
So Jeff, you and I chatted also about trying to do this webinar about EDA. Excuse me. webinar together. And so I definitely want to follow up with you, even if I need to do that while I'm on vacation. And also
Today then.
pardon.
Let's talk later today if you have time. And
Sounds
if you have time, I think Cindy's on the call. If she could give a quick shout out, I'd appreciate it, because she's this is a pretty big one for us.
Yeah. So just FYI, I know I got an announcement from EDA and also from Mark that you were referring to, and I will send that out to our list this morning. I just try not to send more than 1 or 2 announcements a day to the team. So I will get that out also today and put it up on the website too. Anyway, Cindy, you want to just make a quick comment?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. As Jeff said, we did make a pretty big announcement last Thursday, and I would like to go into the details. We are planning an outreach session, Jeff, I, and Steve, that would be great. But this morning, I wanted to offer you just a little bit of background information, and I can post a couple of links in the chat after I'm finished. But last Thursday, we did announce $3 billion in funding opportunities to invest in distressed and underserved communities impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. We're going to invest in infrastructure, innovation, workforce training to create good American jobs and strengthen the nation's global economic competitiveness. There were 6 NOFOs, and I just want to list them here. Again, I'll paste the links to the NOFOs in the chat.
Cindy, you might tell people what a NOFO is.
Yeah, sorry about that. The Notice of Funding Opportunities. So the $3 billion that EDA announced last Thursday have been broken down into 6 funding opportunities. And each one of these funding opportunities gets into the very specific eligibility criteria for each and how much has been allocated for each one of those programs. The first one is the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, and EDA has set aside $1 billion for that. The second one is the Good Jobs Challenge, and we've set aside $500 million for that. The third one is the Economic Adjustment Assistance Challenge, and we've set aside $500 million for that. There is a specific funding opportunity for Indigenous communities, and we've set aside $100 million for that. I feel many of you know that the legislation required us to set aside 25% of our total funding for tourism. So that is $750 million that's being set aside to travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation. And then the final one is statewide planning, research, and networks grants for a total of $90 million. Now that's nationally. The Seattle regional office will get a portion of that. I don't know the details of that just yet. And also I want to address coal communities a little bit. While this is not a separate program, the EDA is allocating $100 million from the Build Back Better Regional Challenge and $200 million of the Economic Adjustment Assistance Challenge to support coal communities. And I mentioned that because I know that Arizona has been really impacted by coal plant closures. So I feel that's something that we need to look at a little bit. For now, I also want to talk about 2 public webinars that are scheduled for this week, one of which is tomorrow at 3 p.m. That's Eastern time, so that'll be 6 o'clock here, and Thursday on July 29th, also at 3 p.m. Eastern time. That's going to provide everyone with a very broad overview of all of these opportunities. It will also be recorded. Those who participate in the initial webinars will receive a follow-up email directing them to more information and giving them directions on how to engage directly with EDA. And I know that we're also talking about specific webinars for each and every one of these Notice of Funding opportunities. And again, I'm going to post all of these links while we get into discussions, if you guys have any questions for me. But I also want to share with you EDA's website that has been set up specifically for all things American Rescue Plan. And that is simply eda.gov/ARPA. And again, I'll post all of that in the chat. That said, we're all still digesting this. It's a lot of information. I just printed it out myself last week at 308 pages. But rest assured, I am reading through everything. And when folks, that information and when you're going to get how to directly engage the EDA is probably going to give you my email and phone number. So again, I'm absorbing all of the information, and I look forward to working with you guys directly and performing some really specifically targeted outreach for the broadband community here in Arizona.
Great. So Cynthia,
Cindy, that's awesome.
Cindy, if you can, maybe we, after this meeting, that you and I can collaborate a little bit in drafting an email that I can send out to everybody. I know, again, I know you sent me a draft, Mark sent me something, but I want to make sure that we have something that will capture the most important things for people to see. And also, Jeff, before I forget, I believe that you've been recording all of those webinars that you've done. And are all those links now on your website?
Yes, all the recordings should be up. We don't record the technical assistance sessions, but the webinars themselves we do record, and they should be posted. Okay. And again, I was going to say thank you, Cindy, for jumping in. That was a great summary. This program's about 5 times bigger than I expected it to be. So this is something we should all be taking a look at in our different communities, and particularly at the county level. I think that this is an opportunity to do our coal communities. I know the folks from Apache County are on, among others. This is a great funding opportunity for our counties. So we're going to put something together here pretty quickly. And Steve, if you could collaborate with us, I'd appreciate it.
Yep.
Because there's a lot here to unpack, and trying to figure out what program is best for your community is going to be important. And then engaging with Cindy. She is one of the more patient people I've ever met, and she will put the time in to get us from A to Z. So thanks again, Cindy.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. I look forward to working with everybody.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Cindy, this morning. So definitely, Jeff, you and Cindy and I should collaborate and figure about getting something out ASAP. Okay, moving on. So again, Mala, I don't believe is on. Holly, do you have anything that you want to add?
I just wanted to say that we're glad Mala is back. I have let her know, Jeff, that you want her to meet with that consulting firm, and she has let me know that she's just waiting for a call back from them to set up a time. I was in Navajo County at the end of last week, and it really put a point on the necessity for the work that that this group is doing, because I met with the volunteers from the all volunteer library at Pinedale, and they were talking about their real challenges with internet, and then also with cell service. And so we had a really good discussion, and the new county librarian for Navajo County was there, and he had listened to Mylan's session that was last Wednesday, I believe, and on the Emergency Connectivity Fund, and was very grateful for that. He had some more questions, which Mala's going to follow up with him on those, but the librarian in Show Low also is interested in the Emergency Connectivity Fund. So we appreciate the fact that Mylan did the webinar, and we will be following up with libraries. We got the word out so that they all need to be able to listen.
Okay, great. Anything else, Holly? So by the way, Holly is our state librarian. So state library has just been awesome. And of course, Mala is super. So anyway, anything else, Holly? If not.
Not at this time.
Okay, Janet, I saw you were online, and introduce yourself.
Good morning,
and
bonjour.
say whatever you got to say.
Thank you so much. Janet Major here, and I work as an Associate Director for the Arizona Telemedicine Program and Southwest Telehealth Resource Center. Couple of things to report. Last week, we hosted our 99th quarterly Arizona Telemedicine Council meeting. Our 100th meeting will be in October, and we plan to celebrate our 25th anniversary. So the Arizona Telemedicine Program has been around for 25 years. We're chaired by Bob Burns, who attended our quarterly meeting last week. Always great to see Bob. There's friends, there's family, then there's Bob. We wouldn't be here without him. The other thing that I wanted to share is we've got a couple of big programs coming up. We put together our team produced a great fact sheet on House Bill 2454, Well, now that bill's gone through the process and been passed, it's very important for us to go back and take a look on exactly what we ended up with. And it has created some confusion, particularly with regards to licensure. So there will be a webinar this Wednesday for anyone you know who is interested on the impact in healthcare for in Arizona for healthcare professionals. It really did. It got a little bit watered down, but we still ended up with a really amazing bill. And here is the registration link, and of course the archive will be the gift that keeps giving. We're also hoping to put together another Arizona Department of Health Services virtual office hours program that we did with Connect Arizona and Tracy and Mala, and we would love to do another one this week or next week. It's a great opportunity not just to share the information on the ECF program this time around, but that program, the funding applications for schools and libraries is due on August 14th. And what the heck happened to July? But August 14th is right around the corner. And the nice thing about the format of that webinar is it's more of a office hours. People can come and ask those questions after they've had a little bit more information about what the funding is, because we sure want Arizona, our libraries and schools to get our fair share of that funding. And I do want to echo what's already been said. And I put together a slide because every time I give a presentation, I say that we have the best libraries on the planet. We are so lucky here in Arizona to have our state libraries and the amazing things that they do. So thank you very much to our libraries for all they do. And I do look forward to collaborating once again to get more information out there to help people get connected to all the great funding that's available. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Janet. Any questions for Janet? If not, Sophia, are you online, or Mylan, one or both of you? Hello, nobody there? Okay, moving on. They did release their technology report, and I will be sending that link out. Sophia did send me that information, and I'll be sending that out to everybody for you to be able to download that report. And hopefully
and I posted the link to that in the chat already earlier in the chat, Steve,
okay,
as well as their general
thank you.
ADE general technology landing page.
Okay, and just a reminder that all of the stuff that's in the chat is captured and included in the summary report that that Orson Henry do and sent out to you. So you will have all those links and information available to you. I will also remind you, and I'll remind you after the meeting too, but you can also save the chat to your computer. And so we'll show you how to do that at the end of the meeting. Okay, Leah, are you online? Haven't seen you in a while. Are you here?
Yes, Steve, good morning.
Oh, good. Nice to hear you, Leah.
Yeah, thanks. And so my name's Leah Marquez Peterson. I chair the Arizona Corporation Commission. We regulate the utilities industry and also have limited jurisdiction with telecom. A quick update, last week I missed because I was attending the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioner Conference in Denver. While we were there, we did pass a broadband resolution. I think I'd sent that to you before, Steve. So that has passed with just a few minor edits. And we had a pretty strong attendance from commissioners across the nation at our telecom committee meeting. Also heard a great presentation from Cox while I was there that really gave a comprehensive look at all the different federal funding from different agencies across the federal government. And I will get those slides, Steve, and send them to you because I thought it was a nice summary because there's so many grants spoken of, and it's trying to understand from a community perspective what can apply and what can help certain folks throughout our state. I think is really helpful.
Great.
And then lastly, wanted to mention, Jeff, I heard you mention the tribal grant session. Earlier this week, I met with the Pascua Yaqui Development Corporation and understand better how the tribes are structured that way. I'm going to connect them to you, Jeff, via email so that they can learn about this grant, the grant session that you're having on Wednesday. And that's it from me. Thank you.
So Leah, do you want to take a couple minutes and give us a little more detail about that resolution that you guys approved at the meeting recently?
Sure. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll tell you, we've worked since the beginning of the pandemic on a national broadband task force that NARUC, which is our national group, put together. And this was comprised of commissioners from across the country. So we're all at different points in broadband struggle. Really, the focus of the task force really was broadband expansion to vulnerable populations. So you had states in all different aspects on that commission, and we brought to the table a lot of data. Whether we had a state broadband office, how I talked about the formation of this task force and how valuable this has been to share information. So the resolution really did ask our NARUC Executive Committee to communicate to the FCC about the needs for, I guess generally I would say better communication for more interaction so that we could provide information on we do a designation called eligible telecommunication carrier, ETC. We approve those at our Arizona Corporation Commission, and we had a lot of feedback on that process. A lot of money flowing, and the states really want to have a voice in this and ensure that we're at the table, and that there's accountability to the telecom companies that are receiving that money to actually produce it within the timeline that was set by the FCC. So the resolution speaks to a lot of those items. It also speaks to ensuring that some of the emergency broadband benefit, I think it's EBB money continues, and that we're paying close attention to the low income programs, but people are having such a hard time coming out of the pandemic financially. So it really spoke to all those different items.
So Leah, you got a sense, and of course, obviously, we've got a lot of states, but was there any sense, like, of course, Arizona, we have our Arizona Universal Service Fund, and we've been talking about repurposing those funds. Do you have a sense about other states? Do they all have those kinds of funds? How are they using those funds? Are they looking at transition of those funds? Do you have any sort of general thoughts about that?
Yeah, that was part of the data gathering we did. And I believe I have a spreadsheet, Steve, I can send to you. But I think it's only about half a dozen that have reassessed their universal service fund and specifically broadened it to broadband, because there's that gray area between the role of the FCC and the role of the state commissions. Right. Several other states, and I don't know how many, have their state legislators have put money together to assist with broadband expansion. And there are a lot of jurisdictional questions. What's the role of a state commission versus a state legislature? What role is the FCC? So I think we were trying to really just clarify that in this resolution as to what our interest was as state commissioners.
And if I'm not
Steve,
mistaken,
I wanted to mention something.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, this isn't always, because this is always behind the scenes, and I think Leah is very modest about this. I meet with all the carriers, and one of the challenges that any state has is regulatory red tape. It's getting businesses in business. And I had a meeting with a company, I believe it was Starry last week, which is one of our RDOF winners. And they're about the third one that said to me what a pleasant process it was getting through our corporation commission, and just how they're encouraged to, we want them here in Arizona. We want new carriers. We want choices. And that's such a refreshing thing to hear that, I mean, honestly, we've had some issues with some of the municipalities in terms of, unnecessary red tape, but it sounds like it's a thorough, fair process. Everybody agrees on it, but we're getting these carriers in business in Arizona. And I just wanted to say thank you, because this could certainly go a different direction. And the fact that everybody seems to be winning by this just says a lot about your leadership over at the Corporation Commission, because again, this wasn't always the case. And thank you for taking this issue and running with it, because I think we have a window here to get a lot of this stuff done in the next, say, 18 months. And getting these carriers here and in business is so important. And again, this is about the third one that said this to me last week. And I thought, wow, we're definitely doing something right over there.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff, for the feedback.
Great, thanks. Anything else or any other questions for Leah? Okay, if moving on, Derek, are you online today? Don't see Derek. And Wes Brown.
Hey, I don't mean to upset. Hey,
go
Steve.
ahead, Kirk.
I don't mean to upset the rhythm, but I got a quick question for Leah. Leah, are you still there by chance?
Yes, I'm still here.
Hi, thanks for all you do. Eric just posted something up on LinkedIn that I realize a couple of days old, regarding the APS proposal to help fund coal community transitions. And I'm assuming that, I don't know if that's docketed at the ACC or not, but in reading the article, there's a lot of initiatives in here that looks like we could do some piggybacking on broadband. Could you comment on that, or am I just out
No,
to lunch?
I'm happy to. So the utilities are individually having conversations with coal impacted communities, tribal and otherwise, because we have Springerville also that will be impacted when that coal plant closes. Alongside, in a parallel fashion, we've opened we call it a generic docket, which is like an online legal folder. And in that docket, we're capturing best practices, concepts or ideas about this transition from coal to clean energy into that docket. So if you have general ideas, you're welcome to write letters or email me and I'll put them into that docket. I also made a note about something someone said earlier about broadband dollars specifically for coal impacted communities. How does that weigh in, and how do we involve that in this conversation? Because that's certainly an important piece of any kind of economic development plan. So we are hard at work at it. I will not say we have the answers yet. I was in Denver actually trying to collect data on any best practices from around the nation, because obviously we're not the only state working through this. And I want to find out what kind of assistance federal government will give, what's the role of a state legislature versus a state commission, and the utilities, of course. So we're having a lot of those conversations right now. Would love any feedback from the group. And you're welcome to just email me. I'll put my email in the chat if you want that to go into the docket.
That's awesome. Thank you. Jeff, do you want to chime in on that? Are you involved in any of that by chance, Jeff, where you were kind of connecting the broadband and the power dots?
You know, it's an interesting nexus, Kirk. Actually, there's a company called SunZia that's building a power line that runs from Albuquerque down through southern Arizona all the way up through Pinal County. And we met with them, gosh, about a month ago to sort of encourage them to replicate the APS model of dark fiber leasing. In fact, I think that referral even came from Lee, if I remember correctly. And so they're definitely involved. I think APS, you know, there's a lot of different places where they can play. I think that, you know, from a regulatory standpoint, that's not my area. I'll leave that to the Corporation Commission. But, you know, we certainly support any move by them to expand the dark fiber program, among other things. You know, we'd love to get Tucson Electric more involved for those of you down in Tucson. I think that's a good thing. Salt River Project has been in this business for a while, but they have some really unique routes, and it is physical diversity from the existing telecom routes. So anything we can do to get our electric companies more involved in broadband, I support.
So Jeff, I know you had been talking with TEP at one time. What's the situation with TEP?
We, you know, quite frankly, it's the pandemic. We really haven't heard much back. You know, if anybody has a good high level contact over there, we'd love to re-engage. I think this is more pre-pandemic. I think they just felt that this wasn't a core business for them, which is totally understandable. That being said, you know, we'd love to encourage them to get more involved in broadband, such as APS or SRP, Mojave Electric. I mean, I can get on the list.
Okay, so let's talk offline about seeing what we can do down here in Tucson to move that process along. Okay.
Great.
Wes Brownfield, I don't see you on the line either. Are you here today? Apparently not. Okay, so let's move on. We have a great panel this morning. Excuse me. Well, Mark, do you want to just make a quick comment about the Tech Council Public Policy Guide?
Sure. We've entered the annual rewrite period for the 2022 guide. We do have it out by October or so. And so last year, for the first time, we generated a substantial federal policy complement to the state stuff that I've been doing for many years. At the state level, we workshop that with a team at Commerce, with a group Ben Blink put together, with the Arizona Telecom and Information Council Board. And anyone who wants to be directly involved, reach out to me. I'm starting a chat among 12 or 15 people Jeff, I think, has actually been assigned as my partner by Steve Zylstra this year in that, and we anticipated many of the things that are already happening. A few we didn't, but it's our turn to now reinforce those new good things and ask and vision some more.
So Mark has developed a telecom focused piece of that guide, and it is available on the meeting webpage. You can download that draft. Mark, I don't know if there's a more recent draft from a week or two ago.
No, that was the codified version that went into last year's big PDF, but we work on it from Word. So no mods yet from last year. It's for review and comment for this year's version.
Okay, thank you.
And then one thing for Derek Massif is, since I don't know if he's on, but you skipped Sun Quarter update.
No, he's not on.
There is an ASU Lighting Up the Future landing page, and there is a significant article on the ASU UTO CIO's site about their recent event series and some good coverage of what they were thinking and what their community that they gathered thinking about availability, adoption, and utilization gaps. So those links also are in the chat.
Okay. And there's a couple of people from ASU who have been involved with that project that are online. Do either of you want to say anything about that? Hearing none, we're moving on. So let's move on to our presentation this morning. We have a great panel discussion and presentation about a topic that's, and it seems to be a hot topic for everybody, which is municipal networks. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Ziegler, who is the principal with Karen Ziegler Consulting Services. Karen's been around for a long time, been a great supporter of this effort. And I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce everybody and to moderate the panel. With that, Karen, you're on.
Thank you, Steve. It doesn't allow me to share. Can you give me permission?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, let me get this open. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for everybody that's on the call. I'm Karen Ziegler. I retired from the state of Arizona a couple years ago, and I've been doing consulting services and also partner with Community Broadband Advocates. Steve asked for us to do a presentation on municipal networks. Now, we only have about 20 minutes or so we can't get into too deep of details, but we wanted to start the discussion with a couple experts, in the area, and then you all will have contact information so you can follow up with our panelists. So with that, I want to introduce our panelist, John Lucas from Community Broadband Advocates. He is the president of that organization, and Paul Ross from Phoenix College. He is the associate vice president of information technology. So John, I'll start with you. Can you just give us a brief background on yourself?
Sure. I'm John Lucas. Of course, I've been involved with ATIC and this group as well. Not as frequent as I need to be, but I have been involved. I am 22 years as a CIO from Graham County, working with broadband issues, emergency services throughout the state of Arizona. Because of that, I'm very community centric as far as how we approach things. Matter of fact, the other team members are a county manager and a county supervisor on our team as well, because we are more geared around the communities, around the counties, around the cities, and so forth. And but I've been involved in this for a long time in Arizona, trying to fight this battle. So we continued on after I retired, and that's kind of what we do now.
Thank you, John. And Paul, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, certainly. Good day, everybody. Paul Ross. I'm the Associate VP CIO at Phoenix College. I've been in educational IT for 25 plus years, 2 countries, 5 states. 4 of those states are here in the US, and both in colleges, universities, and K-12, which means I've had to interact with a whole variety of people over that time, different types of networks, as well as meeting the needs of students in really very diverse communities and diverse school systems. So that's a brief snapshot of me.
Thank you, Paul.
I just want to say, Karen,
and-
Karen, if I can just interrupt. So in the conversations I've had with Paul, he's very knowledgeable. He's a real researcher and researches lots of stuff. So just wanted to add that. Go on, Karen. Sorry.
Great, and I'm hoping great, thanks, Steve. I hope he will share some of that. So we have a brief agenda that I'm just going to touch on, and we have some slides that John Lucas is going to go over. But like I said, we really wanted this to be interactive as a panelist between Paul and John, talking about municipal networks, and then also allowing the folks on the call to ask questions. So just as a high level, we're going to talk about the different types of options for municipal networks, the research and background, what you need to know as a community, sustainability, and then again, we'll open it up for questions and answers. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Lucas. There you go, John.
Okay. Anyways, it's exciting to be with you today. We're basically taking a 2-hour presentation and squishing it down to about 15 minutes. So there's a lot to cover here. It's a very broad subject. What's exciting about today is the fact that what used to be a very narrow option for communities has now become a very broad option for communities. And communities now have options. They have decisions to make. They have involvement to be involved with. And they need to start understanding that they do have some say-so in where they go as a community. What we're going to talk about today is 3 basic types of situations that a community can be involved with. Of course, the old standby is a carrier owned, which has been the standard for Arizona for all these years, which you have a carrier who comes into your community, manages the network, builds it, owns it, receives all the profits for it, makes all the decisions as far as what they do, where they go, where they cherry pick, and basically kind of control what happens in the community. This has been a mixed bag in Arizona. We've had areas that have been very successful, other areas that have not been so successful with the communities. Go ahead and move on down, Karen. Well, then the other one is also community owned. We're going to talk about that, how the community gets involved, and the hybrid of that as well. So looking at the carrier owned, the pros and the cons of that. The carrier owned, of course, requires no community involvement. You know, they come in, they do the job, franchise, they're there, and they take care of it. Funding is generally managed by the carrier. They go out and get the grants, they go out and do all the work, self-fund or whatever it takes to build the network. They roll the trucks, they maintain the network, they provide the carrier services, they provide the help calls and services to community, and all that support is provided by the carrier. Move my thing over here real quick. The cons to it, though, are the community has no control. And so if a carrier decides that they do not want to reinvest in that community, if they decide that they want to cherry pick certain areas and not other areas, the community has no say-so in that. So they're totally at the whim of whatever the carrier wants them to do. Of course, all profits are maintained by the carrier, which of course are the ones putting in all the risk as well. Bandwidth and how that network is set up is also determined by the carrier, whether they have what their download speeds and what their upload speeds, which has become a bigger issue in today's world because you need about as much upload speeds as you need download speeds anymore because of video conferencing and so forth. So, but they determine that, and you have no say-so in that. All the community funding, if you as a community go out and get grants such as E-rate or whatever you go out and get funding for, and you give that to the E-rate to the carrier, that's the last time you see that. it goes to the carrier goes and invests it, it becomes their asset, and again, goes back to their control as well. I mean, it's a good model. It has worked for Arizona, but it does have some very, very strong limitations as far as what the community has to do and how they say what happens in the community as well. The community owned. The community owned, this is where the community actually builds the network. They go out and get the grants. The EDA grant is a perfect example of that. The EDA grant, the NOFO has been, and I assume it's going to stay the same, but has always been that you have to be a municipality or a government agency in order to apply for that grant. So it is geared more towards the community owned grant, where the community actually owns the network. So the community in this situation would actually own the assets and the technology, and they make the decision of what they want, how they want to invest, and how they want to create the network. All the income and fees are cycled through the community. Okay, so it's part of the community's, basically a part of their utility service. Excess resources can be leased off to third-party providers. And I think this is the key of a community-owned network, is what's called open access. And it allows the community to, because they own the physical network, allows them to adopt what's called an open access network. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically what that means is you run a single fiber into a home, and that single fiber can service multiple ISP providers. Okay, it's not a one-to-one, which would you have in a carrier own. The carrier comes in, you get that carrier service, and they don't offer anybody else. If the community owns it, they have the opportunity through technology, which is well-established technology, to basically say, okay, I'm going to let you have this carrier this week, or then you can submit or subscribe to a different carrier in a month now and try them, but you can try different services by different carriers. Now, the advantage of that, of course, is not only that you have multiple competition going on, but it allows carriers from outside of your region. So carriers from another state, carriers from even the country, I guess, really technically could actually be an ISP provider on a network like this, because they're not constrained by the physical constraints of the network itself. The cons of it are that the community must manage the financing. They must manage the grants. They must go out and apply for the grants. They must do this, they have to do this as some type of utility service. Therefore, they're going to have to do the billing, the maintaining and repairing, and generally roll the trucks, or at least contract somebody to roll the trucks. The key to this and to this community-owned network, because you are as a community doing this, is you must keep your debt load low. Any kind of debt in this situation can be detrimental to this type of a network. So you can't just go out and borrow a bunch of money. You've got to go after grants. You've got to go after self-funding. You've got to go after things so that you don't have a debt load to carry. Because what a lot of the communities do where they have failed who've tried this is they've got too high of a debt load, and they also forget what most all your carriers understand is that equipment does not last forever. So every 7, 10, 15 years, you got to change out this equipment. And we're not talking about, a few $1,000s here and there. You're talking about major backbone equipment, which means you could be looking at $2 or $3 million, every 10 years, it's got to be changed out. So you've got to build that into your cycle and your billing as far as your income coming in, and put that money aside. So that's something the community would have to be able to manage and deal with all that. So there's some real advantages to this, but there are also some real problems as far as government managing things and how to manage such a volatile and such a transient environment. Go on, Karen. So another one that we've come up with that actually seems to work better and has a lot more of the pros and cons, the pros to this, and a better mix, is what we call a hybrid network. And this is basically where you can get involved, where as a community, the community owns part of the network, it goes after the grants, and there's a joint, but it's a joint venture with a third party. So they may share the assets, they may share some responsibility. The pros, of course, is they do share this cost risk. By bringing a third party in, that third party can also help with some of the matching funds, that you've got to come up with. Otherwise, the communities have to come up with all that. The fees are an income are cycled through the community as well as a third party, depending on your agreements. But one real big advantage of this is you've got a carrier involved. So you've got somebody involved that knows the industry that can help rolling trucks and so forth. But because the community is involved as well, they have some say so to try to bring in the open access. So therefore, you don't have just that one carrier coming in and say, all right, this is the new rule in our community, because the community owns part of it and is involved with it, rather than just saying, here's a grant, have a good time. They're saying, no, here's a grant, we're going to share ownership of this network with you so that we can have some say so in it. And that then allows them to require that a part of the participation of this third party is to allow the open access, which means to allow multiple ISP providers to service the area. Now, generally, you do not want more than maybe 3 or 4 ISPs provided an area because it's just not enough market for everybody, but it does open that up. And of course, it's still viewed as a utility, and it's viewed as a as this joint venture. It is limited more to the open grants that are available out there that allow third-party partnerships. So you have to be aware of that as well. The cons to this are that the community has to negotiate with a third party, and sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do. But they have to come up with an agreement and work it out. They'll have to probably go through a bid process to bid it out to see who they can work with. The third party has also some involvement in the decisions that are made. Okay, but it is more of a joint venture between the communities. Grants are obtained by both parties, so that both the community owns part of the grant, and maybe the third party may own part of the grant. So it is truly a joint venture together, but it does share some of those problems and solve some of those problems.
Okay, John, I'm going to let Paul jump in here and see if he's got any comments or if he wants to add anything about the types of municipal networks. And he's got some background in research and sustainability, if he wants to share that.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern at the moment when you start talking about municipal networks, especially with ongoing sustainability, but also from a policy and regulatory standpoint. There are certain states across the country where municipal networks, broadband networks, are actually outlawed. There's legislation, there's actually active mechanisms that prohibit municipalities basically providing broadband access. And I'll drop some resources into the chat soon that provides links to a whole variety of legislative efforts and news articles that relate to this topic. So there's a lot of, because of the funding that's coming a lot from the federal government right now, a lot of communities are trying to work out, one, how can they leverage it and how can they build that plan? And working with and building that plan does require partnerships. And the partnerships are pretty extensive that communities are trying to navigate, both politically, legislatively, but also operationally. In some areas, there's very limited options. But it's also meaning that there's very flexible partnerships that are being created. So whether it's the local ISP, where there might only be one ISP in the community, and or other groups such as nonprofits, Native and tribal communities are actually a pretty significant component in many communities, particularly rural communities. And so you're starting to see that. But also then what are the other groups within the community areas, such as school districts, as well as some of the nonprofit spaces where some of the nonprofit organizations actually have their own existing networks, although they might not be tremendously well-resourced in terms of bandwidth. What they are well-resourced is in terms of community connections. And those community connections really do come to play when you're starting to build that buy-in across. So when it comes to municipal networks, one of the things that really does stand out is the word time. You need time to build everything. You need time to build those relationships and also to address the operational aspect of things. The other piece is departmentalization. Many cities are actually highly segmented when it comes to their operations. So you might be talking to one department and thinking, well, I'm getting everything I need. Well, there might be 3 other departments that you'll need to talk to within a city arrangement, because you have to get that knowledge of a city's internal infrastructure, internal operations, to be able to effectively navigate, because they do operate differently. If you're working with a small community in a rural area of Arizona, you may not have all that departmentalization. But if you're working with large cities like Tucson or Phoenix, there is very different departments who have segmented duties, and you'll have to work with multiple departments. And not every department talks to each other. So you have to then be the bridge and to be able to enable that to happen. And lastly, what I will say is that when you go through this and you're working with building these types of networks, you will develop an incredible amount of knowledge. You never stop learning when it comes to this topic. And it's a constantly moving ball field. And you do have to be able to move between the bases very quickly as the needs arise, but also as the knowledge is developed across the partners, because there's a lot of people who are entering the space, and even on the city side, who don't necessarily understand all the different types of technologies, but what they do understand is the structure and the processes and the rules and regulations that you need to be able to work through, or they're at least able to navigate that to be able to assist. So there's just a few of my thoughts, Karen. John?
Great, thanks, Paul. And then John mentioned open access networks, and we have a slide here. I'll let John go through, and then we're going to open it up for some questions and discussion.
I just want to give you an example of what an open network is. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of them before. I'm sure you have. Basically, what it is you have the city or the municipality owns the network, the physical infrastructure. They contract out to an operator, somebody who they bid out to, comes in and actually manage the network, or they can manage it themselves, whichever one they want to do. The operator then works with retailers, which is separate ISPs, to basically lease out that resource, that service availability to other retailers that they can then work with their end users. So the end user basically pays the retailer and handles all the service calls to the end user. The end user doesn't even know that the city owns this. They work in that loop right there. The retailer then, of course, pays the wholesaler, which is the city, for the service. And then the operator works with the retailer to service any kind of physical network issues and problems, rolling trucks and so forth like that. As Paul mentioned there, I think one of the areas, if a city does get into a city-owned network, one thing that has to occur is that the city cannot be an ISP provider. I mean, they can, but it's just the legality of all that is very cumbersome and can cause a lot of problem with gift clauses and so forth. The limitation of the city is to control and own the network itself. They need to be able to work with third parties, ISPs, as this open network, and let the ISPs do their job. So you're not competing with ISPs that way. You're basically enhancing ISPs, and keeps you out of a lot of trouble as well. This is a note on that, but it's a very simple environment that's kind of self-funding as well.
Okay, thanks, John. And so I'm going to open it up for some questions. Let's see. We have some in the chat. I don't believe so. So like I said, that's a great overview of the types of municipal networks, things that communities need to consider when they're planning, for a community network. So I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there, so I'm happy to entertain, questions.
Karen?
Yes, Mark?
Mark Goldstein, good morning. So I did want to just point out that in our task force report for November, which you kindly and ably helped edit, John Kelly and I developed an extensive appendix, Appendix A, which is exactly about the spectrum of public-private partnership, some of the good thinking been happening with US Ignite and one or two other groups in that regard, a lot of resources and discussion in that. Downloadable, of course, from our site, and still pretty current in many regards. And then there's one other form of community network, which is the no ownership model. I don't know that there's examples in Arizona, maybe what Arizona Blockchain Initiative was doing in the downtown Phoenix area, but that's where residents and businesses open up their secondary Wi-Fi channel to mesh and interact and share with a public, passersby and area people. And so that didn't appear on Community Network, and only viable perhaps in certain circumstances, but I did want to mention that variant.
That's a great point. Thank you, Mark, for that. And you're right, there was a lot of work that were put into the report back in November, and that's available on the AZBSN website. So is there any other questions? I heard a couple other folks trying to chime in.
Yes, this is John again. Is Cindy still on the line?
Cindy Patak, are you on the line? I think she may have dropped off.
Okay, I was going to ask her if they're going to allow a public-private partnership in this new granting or not.
Yeah, I don't believe so. I looked at the NOFOs, and I think it's still the government entity or nonprofit.
Yeah, EDA is very adamant about the money needs to go to a government entity. So I would, if you're looking for the EDA grant, that would be the I guess, applicant. There's ways to work with those groups, but they're very strict about that.
That puts you more in the community-owned environment then, as far as the infrastructure goes, in order to apply for an EDA grant.
Yeah, I like the idea of the community-owned conduit network, for example. We've seen that in some decent-sized cities. I think Lincoln, Nebraska has that. What it does, it cuts down the cost of development for private carriers. And it's sort of what I found that to be is sort of a neutral ground. When you start putting your own fiber in, it's one thing. When you compete directly, that's a whole other level of escalation. So I like that. The Mojave Electric model is another good one up in Bullhead City. I think it's really specific to the community, what carriers you have there, what the need is. And John, you've been doing this for a long time. So, hire someone like John or another consultant who understands, who's seen what works and what doesn't work, because the last thing we want to do is see our communities waste some of this money they're getting right now on bad projects. I think it's important to go with folks that have done this, that understand Arizona before you start spending the money.
Thanks, Jeff. And, I'll also put a plug in for the state plan that's under development. That's going to give a great guide for these communities. And I'm sure a lot of the funding that will be coming out of ACA, the projects will need to be in line with that state plan.
Yeah,
Jeff?
again, we're not going to tell the communities what to do per se. We just want to support them and hopefully help with the turmoil aspect of it. But this is an idea that's really come about a lot more popular in the last few years. I think there's a good way to do it and there's a bad way to do it. And again, the key is to bring in professionals who understand that and can help you.
Jeff, is there anybody who's talking in the legislature that you're aware of about outlawing community networks?
Quite frankly, I've heard the opposite. I've heard people asking about why we don't do more of these. As I said, there's reasons on both sides. I think, John, I know this could be a lot longer presentation, but there are some real success stories and there are some crash and burns on these things. And, I think the key is to look at each community individually and try to come up with what works best for them.
And Steve, this is Mark. Just in my experience, that was more a risk 3-4 years ago, and that risk has become minimized. As Jeff has said, there are forces actively promoting those ideas these days, And in my mind, a lot less likely that incumbents in Arizona would now stand up for that when they haven't in recent years past.
Okay.
And then some of the resources I dropped into the chat, there are some maps there to different initiatives around the country that you can zoom in on as well. This is a focus for me in terms of research. I am doing my PhD, and so digital divide and such is actually going to be my dissertation focus. And so, but there's some great resources that exist now. But because things are moving so quickly, I will say there's no way to keep up with all the different initiatives that are happening in communities and states. But the best we can do is to map them out as we find them.
Thank you.
Karen, a quick question for you or John or Paul. As a municipality looks at this potential journey, is there some capacity they need to, you'd recommend they have already available? So for example, if they have a municipal wastewater treatment, they'd probably have a billing process. And if they want to do broadband, then they would probably want to have a billing process. Or are there other kinds of readiness elements that the municipality should either have or should seek as foundational before they go down this way?
Well, this is John. You know, the billing process, it's kind of an interesting thing. You would think, all right, you're going to do a billing, but billing, when you start talking about broadband networks, is much more involved because your billing is actually your core central point to this pyramid you've got going on. From the billing, that's where you basically create new customers or you disable new customers. So you establish and change services and so forth. So the billing has to be more than just sending the bill out. The billing actually has to have interfaces into the back end of the network to be able to, and otherwise you're gonna be doing double entry. You're gonna be going over here to put in the billing and going over here to make a change. And so the billing systems really need to be billing systems that are designed for broadband industries. So so it's not just, they just can't take their utility billing and do that. Now, what they can do, of course, is they can have interfaces written that work with their billing system to the management side of the network. Okay, but that would have to be created there, or you could buy a system that already has it. But it's not just simply a matter of sending the bill out. But that is something they need to think about. But that again would be having a department that is capable of handling that. We generally try to encourage, because especially on the ones that are looking at this are not going to be big cities. It's generally going to be your small community, small towns or whatever. Generally, it's probably better for them. We encourage them to basically outsource those type of functionalities, even rolling trucks even. So they basically own the asset. They outsource that to people who actually know what they're doing. They can roll the trucks. They have the technical staff. They have the billing in place. They do all that for them. And so they get the involvement because they actually own it, but then somebody who knows what they're doing is actually rolling the trucks and taking care of things. So it's not as simple as just, I'm going to send a bill out to people. It's much more involved.
Yeah, John, Mark, you're absolutely right. And billing is kind of the aggregate term, but you got to be able to provision and change services. You got to be able to have trouble tickets and their resolution. So you're right. It's a complex scenario to do proper customer service on any network.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly. Go ahead, John.
I was gonna say, if you're involved in the hybrid situation where you have a carrier involved, that's where that hybrid really works out nice, because the carrier already has that establishment. You may own the physical fiber. The carrier is involved with you to put the network in, to light the fiber up. They handle the billing part of it. You have an interface into it to be able to, deal with the customer service. And they walk into your, county, city office, whatever. That's the nice thing about the hybrid. It gives you that total flexibility. Where if you're community only, you're on your own. But of course, if you're looking at an EDA grant, you kind of have to go that direction. So you need to look at, third-party partnershiping. But you have to RFP that out. You can't just do a public-private partnership, that has to be a bid to do that, so.
Karen, before we move on, can
Karen?
you stop your sharing, please? So we can bring everybody back on.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hey, Steve, this is Gene.
Yeah, Gene.
I'm with Cox. Obviously, I have a different view on maybe some of this, but what I haven't seen yet is anybody talking about the actual cost to build. So I can tell you from our perspective, depending on the terrain, it's anywhere from $30 a foot to well over $100 a foot just to trench and lay fiber. So if you're talking about rural communities, especially in the mountains, you're talking about $500,000 plus per mile just to lay fiber. And that doesn't count the hardware or the equipment on the end of it. So I think everybody's in a rush that we have all this money coming from the government. Let's build these networks without really considering that it's, from a Cox perspective, we put well over $1.5 billion in our network and just in the last 5 years. So it's not an inexpensive proposition. And, when you talk about carriers and our billing and how we do it and the rates, et cetera, there's a reason. I mean, you got to have a return because you have to continue. I know John mentioned 10 to 15 years. We're upgrading our network every 5 years. I mean, that's how fast equipment, et cetera, hardware is changing. So again, it's not an inexpensive proposition. And I think somebody needs to, if you're going to look at this, you need to start putting some dollars to the charts.
Yeah, Gene, I think that's a great point, and we didn't mean to disparage the work that the carriers are doing because it is a heavy lift, and we're working with a smaller community in Arizona and looking at those costs. And when we talk about billing, Mark, had said about the whole trouble ticket and building the customer database, but it's also being responsible for collecting and passing on regulatory fees and things like that. So there's a lot to it. Municipalities are not necessarily in the business to do that. So if there's a good partnership available between a carrier and a local community, in my personal opinion, I think that is probably the best of both worlds.
We need to wrap it up. We're kind of out of time. Is there any other pressing things that people want to say or add or question? If not, Karen,
Steve,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I put something in the chat here at the end. And I just want to say, at least there's some thinking at the congressional level about extending the Emergency Connectivity Fund. There's now a bipartisan, bicameral bill that would follow on with, I think, this year's $7.2 billion in the ability of schools and libraries to provide student and patron connectivity with $8 billion a year for 5 more years. So who knows in this Congress, but it did come from both houses and both parties. So I'm seeing that as a good sign that there's interest in continuity.
Okay. Anything else? Somebody started to ask a question or comment. Hearing none, then it looks like we're kind of done for today. Thank you, Karen and John and Paul. You guys did a great job. I think it was a great overview. Andrew, put you and I chat here fairly soon. Looks like you're, and just a couple of quick reminders. If you want to contact any of the presenters, their contact information is on the meeting announcement that I sent out. It is on the meeting webpage and so forth. Secondly is, if you are interested, you can go to the chat and, excuse me, go to the chat, and on the bottom on the right-hand side, you can, you'll see 3 ellipses, and you can download the chat file. And also, again, Henry and Oris will include that in the summary of our meeting. So, there's lots of different ways to follow up from this meeting today. Any other announcements, events, things that we need to know about? Going once, going twice, and I believe that we are done for today. Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve. Enjoy
Thanks
the rest
all.
of your vacation.
Thanks.